President and Mrs. Clinton, Mayor Diekmann and Minister Diekmann, members of the German and American communities, and ladies and gentlemen. You can see today is a very special occasion for us for a number of reasons. A visit by the President and his family is a most important event. We welcome you, Mr. President, Mrs. Clinton. You have honored us and made us very proud with your visit. We are especially grateful that you have come to share in a truly historic event for this community, for the city of Bonn, and for the Atlantic Alliance. In a few weeks, the American Embassy and its employees will leave Bonn after nearly 50 years of partnership. Our departure is in many ways sad. We will miss our friends, and we will miss the wonderful Rhine Valley. But it is also joyful. The American Embassy in Bonn was born of war and division. Its goal from the beginning was to help restore freedom and unity to Germany and to Europe. We are moving because our mission was accomplished. A unified Germany will now be governed from a unified Berlin. Mr. President, this accomplishment was given new meaning during the past 2 weeks here in Bonn and in Cologne as Germans and Americans cooperated within NATO to achieve peace in Kosovo. Last week's meetings of foreign ministers and this week's summit will go down in history. They were a turning point in our joint efforts to support freedom in all parts of Europe. But the crisis in the Balkans also demonstrated that there's much more to be done. And this is why we are determined that the legacy of the American Embassy in Bonn should be a living one. For the many thousands of Americans who have lived and worked here, the name Bonn will remain an inspiration. Many members of our community, from culture, education, and industry, as well as government, will remain here. And our community, which you see surrounding you, of Plittersdorf, will continue to be a center of international cooperation. We are delighted that the Bonn International School, housed in the buildings of the former American School, will continue to bring together children from many nationalities. And I am especially pleased today to present this chapel, the Stimson Memorial Chapel, to the city of Bonn. Transfer of the chapel to the city will ensure continuation of the international ecumenical congregation which has flourished here for many years. The chapel will continue to be a place of fellowship, of education, and community action for members of the many cultures who gather here. Mr. President, I can think of no more meaningful legacy for our community than to leave behind our school and our church. Your presence today adds an historic importance to this occasion, which I know will inspire us to make our partnership even stronger. And I wish also to express our gratitude to the city of Bonn for being able to accept this offer. To seal this partnership, I wish, in good American fashion, to present with a key.
Thank you.
Thank
you, sir. Mr. President, Mrs. Clinton, Excellence, ladies and gentlemen, 2,000-year-old Bonn has already received a great number of presents. For the first time during its history, however, it is given a church. The city of Bonn accepts this present from the United States of America with gratitude and delight. It accepts it, as it is said in the decision taken by the City Council of Bonn in acknowledgement of German-American cooperation over a period of 15 years. We are happy to be given the opportunity to shape a new future for the spiritual center of the American parishes in Bonn. During 5 decades, Christian churches have worked together in this building in ecumenical sisterhood. The church has also been open for services of the Jewish community. It thus has become a place of dialogue between Christians and Jews. The traditions of this place of worship will not be changed in any way. This building will remain a living sign of remembrance of thousands of American families having lived part of their lives here, was one of the most beautiful sights of the Rhine Valley, the Seven Hills in close view. Mr. President, the handing over of this church is a visual signal for the transfer of the Embassy of the United States of America from Bonn to Berlin. Ever since its foundation 50 years ago in Bonn, has the Federal Republic of Germany, now unified for about 10 years, been a reliable partner of the United States. Our two countries have stood up together for the fundamental values of Western democracies, for human rights, for peace, and for freedom. Washington and Bonn, the names of two cities, are also synonyms for common values and aims. Mr. President, Mrs. Clinton, you have just signed the Golden Book of the City of Bonn. Before you, your former presidents, Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Nixon, and Carter, honored Bonn in the same way. Standing on the steps of the old City Hall of Bonn in 1963, John F. Kennedy cited the words of Thomas Jefferson that the disease of liberty is catching. The policy associated with Bonn's name did not leave any doubt as to the aim that this dream of liberty would become and had to become reality for Germany, for Europe, and finally for the whole world. This dream of liberty has come true for all Germans in 1989. One of the consequences of this new reality is the transfer of the constitutional institutions of the Federal Republic of Germany from Bonn to Berlin. This means that also our American friends will move away from here. I wish you and your families good luck and happiness also in Berlin. You will leave behind a city which since 50 years has been the political center of the most successful democracy German history has ever seen. A city whose profile is changing a lot. A city which faces the challenge of a new future with confidence. No longer as a political center, but as a city with new international assignments, as a city of science and of culture, as a modern center of economic activities, especially in the fields of telecommunications and logistics. Mr. President, all mankind knows all men brothers. Alle Menschen werden Brüder. These words resound in the great Ode to Joy by our poet Friedrich Schiller. They have been set to music by Ludwig van Beethoven, famous son of Bonn, in the well-known final movement of the 90th Symphony. This musical theme has been chosen as the hymn of the Europeans. With its words and its notes, it forms a political imperative for the countries of Europe. The American Thomas Jefferson, as well as the Bonner Ludwig van Beethoven, in spite of their different biographies, were both inspired by the dream of freedom, a freedom which up to our days is in constant danger. With the music of Ludwig van Beethoven, the city of Bonn wants to say thank you with all her heart to you, Mr. President. May you keep the Bonn area in good memory as a story of success of the American-German friendship. Thank you very much.
Lord Mayor Diekman, thank you very much for your words and for your wonderful gift of Beethoven's music. Mr. Ambassador, ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by saying a word of thanks to our embassy staff and to those of you here in Bonn who have been our hosts for so many years. We are very proud of our long presence here, but we know, as the Lord Mayor said, that our departure is made possible by something we have dreamed of for a very long time. The Germany envisioned when the American High Commission came to Bonn in 1951. Also, thanks in large measure to Germany's leadership and example, we see the Europe envisioned in the days of Truman and Adenauer. A Europe free, undivided, and at peace, at last within our grasp. The man for whom this chapel was named, Henry Stimson, shared those dreams of Germany and Europe. I understand one of his relatives, Arthur Stimson, is here today, and we are honored by that. I also want to wish the chapel's pastor, Dr. Hubbard, well as he returns to America tomorrow after his service here. We thank you, sir, and we wish your successor, Reverend Satra. And Father McNally, thank you for being here. Hillary and I and Secretary Eisenstadt, who's about to become the Deputy Secretary of the Treasury, he's moving too. All of our Americans here are profoundly grateful to those of you who have served in Bonn and have done a remarkable job of forging the truly incredible relationship we have with Germany. It is a security alliance, an economic partnership, and a cultural bond. The gift of this chapel is meant to symbolize that whole relationship and to make it stronger. I thank all of you who have made it possible. As I think about where we are today compared to where we were 50 years ago, and the work we did today for the Europe our children and grandchildren will live in 50 years from now, I think it is altogether fitting that we are here in Bonn, the home of Beethoven. For his life makes possible for us to see one of the most important admonitions of the Scriptures. The Bible says, where there is no vision, the people perish. Beethoven, I believe, was the greatest composer in the history of the world. He was also stone deaf. He wrote his music because of his vision, because of the melding together of his mind, his heart, his memory, his imagination. Human beings are at their best, not only individually, but working together when they are guided by their visions and they are good. The summit we have just completed was the last leaders' meeting of the 20th century. It followed our victory in Kosovo for values and for the vision we have of the 21st century. I want to talk very briefly, and I thank the rain for letting up. So God approved my interpretation of the Scriptures, you see. Thank you. I want to say just a few words about the vision we have for Southeastern Europe, for our relations with Russia, for the challenges of the new global economy. Consider first the lessons we would be leaving this century for the next if we had come to Cologne without having taken a stand in Kosovo. Then we would be saying that innocent men, women, and children could be singled out for destruction because of their ethnic heritage or religious faith, even in the heart of Europe. That innocent people could be driven from their homes, loaded on train cars, raped and killed, their religious faith and their culture erased, and the world would not hear, see, speak, or act to stop it. That the world's most powerful alliance is simply powerless to stop crimes against humanity, even those on its own doorstep. Years from now, people would say that we lived through a time of amazing progress in human freedom and economic prosperity. But the children of the 21st century would have to look back and say that we failed a decisive moral test, that our inaction imperiled our own security, that we had not learned the lessons of the bloody 20th century. Now think about how the century is actually ending, with a powerful statement by our 19 democracies that we will stand up for the innocents in the face of evil. With our alliance strong, united, working with partners all across the continent to meet common objectives. With ethnic cleansing not only defeated, but as the Kosovars go home, reversed. With the remarkable sight of German troops marching with their democratic allies through the towns and villages of a Balkan country, cheered as liberators by people grateful to be going home in peace and safety. We may never have a world that is without hatred or tyranny or conflict, but at least instead of ending this century with helpless indignation in the face of it, we instead begin a new century and a new millennium with a hopeful affirmation of human rights and human dignity. The people of Kosovo have a future again. And there is no future in Europe for Mr. Milosevic and his policy of manipulating normal human differences for inhuman ends. Now, we find ourselves at that pivotal moment between winning a conflict and winning the peace. Today, the last Serb forces are leaving Kosovo in accordance with the deadline that has been set. Over 60,000 Kosovars have already gone home. I believe shortly we will formalize our agreement with the KLA to demilitarize their forces. Of course, there are still dangers ahead, but we also have a remarkable opportunity. And what we do now will determine the character of this continent, the shape of our alliance, and the nature of our partnership with Russia for years and years to come. Our biggest challenge, perhaps, will be to put in place a plan for lasting peace and stability in the Balkans. We cannot do this a province, a nation, a crisis at a time. All our G8 partners have agreed it is time to help transform the entirety of Southeastern Europe, the way Western Europe was transformed after World War II, and Central Europe was after the Cold War. We want to give the region's democracies a path to a prosperous and shared future, a unifying magnet that is more powerful than the pull of old hatreds and destructions, which has threatened to tear them apart. Some say this is a dream. Some still believe the people of the Balkans are somehow predestined to a never-ending struggle over land, faith, and power. But after all, that is what, in times past, people used to say about England and France, or France and Germany, or Germany and Poland, or Poland and Russia. If we had listened to all the people throughout human history who said that we couldn't get along, none of us would be here today. Look around this crowd at the different faces, the different races, the different religious faiths. None of us would be here today if we had believed that any of those past conflicts was more powerful and more predestined than the innate goodness and potential and dignity of all human beings without regard to their origin. Henry Stimson once said, "The most deadly sin I know is cynicism." Today, we ought not to have much of that, for we have a lot to hope for. Most of Central and Eastern Europe is transforming itself through democracy and cooperation with neighbors. If the countries of Southeastern Europe keep taking the same path, we have pledged to do our part, to work with the World Bank, the IMF, and others to support the economic development and the private investment necessary to grow the economy and the futures of the people of Southeastern Europe. We ought to integrate them into the global economy and into our regional arrangements. All of this, of course, will cost money, but how well spent that money will be. The costliest peace is cheaper than the cheapest war. This summit was also the first meeting between the leaders of Russia and the West since our disagreement over the conflict in Kosovo. Of course, Russia opposed our use of force there, but it did work with us to achieve the peace that fulfilled our objectives. Now we have committed to implementing this peace together in a way that will strengthen our relationship, reassure the security of innocent civilians, both ethnic Serb and Albanian, in Kosovo, and preserve the unity of NATO. The summit gave us a chance to work on what we have in common. President Yeltsin and I, for example, agreed to hold discussions later this year on START 3, further reductions of our nuclear arsenals, and preserving the ABM Treaty, even as we work to get START 2 ratified. Our G8 partners agreed to increase support for our Enhanced Threat Reduction Initiative. That is what safeguards nuclear materials, technology, and expertise in Russia so that horrible weapons of mass destruction don't fall into the wrong hands. We also recognize that Russia's future depends upon the health of its economy. President Yeltsin affirmed today that Russia can thrive in the global marketplace only with a strong reform program. And the rest of us made it clear that we will move quickly once Russia's IMF program is in place to support the rescheduling of its debt. Our final challenge in Cologne was to join forces to maximize the benefits and minimize the risks of the global economy to ordinary people the world over, whether in wealthy or poor countries. The rise of an open economy in the world represents one of the most hopeful developments in history. But to build public support for it, we must make sure that the benefits are widely shared, that when people are disrupted, as they inevitably will be, they are helped to get back to a good life, and that no one is left behind. At this summit, we took critical steps to make the economy of the world more resilient, to moderate the cycles of boom and bust that have gripped Southeast Asia and the rest of Asia in the last couple of years, and to do more to protect the most vulnerable among us. We resolved to work with the International Labor Organization to eradicate abusive child labor and enforce good labor standards around the globe. We pledged to launch a new global trade round at the WTO meeting in Seattle later this year to spread the benefits of trade more broadly. And we launched an historic effort to move the world's poorest nations onto a path of growth and independence, something I have been working on for most of my tenure as president. Our plan will more than triple the amount of money available for debt reduction, reducing up to 70% of the outstanding debt of the poorest nations of the world. We also committed to increase the number of countries eligible for this aid and to deliver the relief faster. in ways that will free up the resources of the poor country so they can spend that money on health care and education, on the fight against AIDS, on the alleviation of poverty, on future prosperity. It will help to ensure that no country committed to that kind of progress is too indebted to achieve it and to meet the basic needs of its people. It will help to reduce poverty and expand opportunity. It will help to turn debtor countries into good citizens of the world and good partners for Germany and the United States. So I say to you, we left this summit grateful for our long partnership with our European allies and especially with Germany. We look forward to the movement of our embassy to Berlin because it is the fulfillment of the visions of those who came before us. We will always be grateful for what the people of Bonn have given us in partnership and support. But as you think about the future, whenever you are tempted to believe that we cannot eradicate ethnic hatred from the Balkans, whenever you are tempted to believe that some people are destined to be chained in poverty and oppression, whenever you are tempted to believe that the world's problem, like the spread of AIDS, cannot be turned back, think about your native son. If anyone at any point in human history had ever said, the greatest composer who ever lived will be stone deaf, they would have laughed and laughed and laughed. There is nothing we cannot do without the right vision. Thank you, and God bless you.